to show you how to use global variables in Xcode. And when I say global variables, I mean one that can be accessed from view to view and in separate class files. I've created a simple single view project here. I've added a second view and associated a new view controller with it. It's right here, view 2, view controller. I've also created H&M files of type NS object and called that class global, which you see right here. And that's where my global variables originate from. On the storyboard, see here, I created simple views consisting of some labels and buttons. I'll use the labels combined with the action buttons to display the global variables and prove that they are working. So let's take a look at the global H file first. If we look in here, this is where we initialize our variables and methods. Variable 2 is our global variable right here, and you'll notice that it is initialized with the externs keyword. I'll explain more about that later. Variable 1 is our more traditional global variable called a singleton. It's called a singleton because it only gets initialized once. Again, I'll explain more about this as we go along. And then lastly, we have some methods down here. One's for initializing our singleton, and the other one is an example of a static method that you could also use to share some data between classes. So I'll show you how that works as well. So if we look in the M file, you'll see that we declare our variable 2 again at the top here. Remember, that's the one we declare on the other side with the externs keyword. This allows us to tell it what type of variable it's going to be. And then we could have initialized it in here. I didn't do that though. And then we synthesize our variable 1, and we're going to create this shared variable that's of type global, which is the name of this class, and that is static. And what this allows us to do, we use this shared singleton method. We check to see if this has been initialized already. If it hasn't, then we do initialize it. If it's not, then we just move along. This is basically the mechanism for making sure that our variable var2 only gets initialized once. And I could have many different variables in this class, and they would all only get initialized once. Then I have this static variable, which I just returned. This is an example of I made this of type NS string. Let's say that you had a database that you were accessing, and that probably would be the same throughout the class. So you could use this method to call it from class to class, and these other variables here could change. Like you might change what's stored in var2 or var1, but this one you wouldn't change, and it would make sense because the database wouldn't change throughout the life cycle of your app. Alright, so let's kind of see how we call these from separate methods. So let's go into our first view controller. The only thing we have in the H file here are things for connecting to our storyboard, making some labels and some IB actions. So one thing you'll notice in the view controller here is that we have this, first of all, we have this import where we import the global.h file, which gives us access to everything in those files, the global H&M, and we create this object called myvar that is of type global, and that's what we do to kind of initialize. That's what we call that shared singleton method, to initialize that global class, and now that does that one time. Even if we call that in other classes, it'll see that the shared has already been initialized and won't bother doing anything with it. So let's take a look at a little bit of difference of how the global variable is used in comparison to the singleton. So with the singleton here, so I have my label that we're going to display the singleton to the screen, and you notice you have to use it in conjunction with that object that we created, the myVar. So we do myVar.var1 to display any of the singleton variables from the global class. Now to use the externs, which is our global variable, you don't have to do any of that. As long as you've imported this class, you can just call that variable. That's what that externs keyword allows you to do. And then just to kind of show you that you can change the variables and yet it'll still hold it through multiple views, and when we click the action button, I actually change what's being held in our externs variable. I left the singleton alone just so we can see as well that that gets held between classes as well. So it should say the same thing that it started out. So if we just take a look at what the initial settings of these variables are, one should say my cool singleton. I don't give a initial one to this, so it should come up as blank, that label. And this one says my database. And if you look in here, so we should see something appear when I click on the action for the global variable and the static variable. The singleton should come up right away. So let's see what happens when we actually run this. So you'll see, it says my cool singleton here. When I hit action, now I have my cool global variable, and that's the static method that's shown, right? So with the static method, that returns an NS string, so I could just make that right here equal to, I could make it equal to an NS string or to the label.text. And then kind of show you how, if we go to screen 2, that again, my cool singleton, my cool global variable, it held them from screen to screen. I didn't display the static label because you can take my word, that one works throughout the class, never changes. That's thus static. When I hit action here, just show you how they could change. So if you look in view2.m in the action, that's what I had. I just changed the values for each of those variables and then showed them to the screen with the labels. So it's pretty straightforward, I believe. I did initialize this again, but like I said, it only gets initialized once, so it probably didn't do anything. Whatever view gets shown first will do the initialization, but we did create the variable again and the import, and that allows us to use those objects. So, and I can show you that when we go back to screen 1, see now it has the new variables for each of them saved in there. Static one I'm not showing. If we look in the view did load, I don't actually show the static one. Actually, I should point out that the way the static method is called is you just use the class, which has to be imported, and it's it's a method call basically. So the class and then the name of the static method, and that runs that method, which all that method, as I've shown you before, does is returns a string. So that's it. I hope this is straightforward enough. I don't know that there's an advantage from one to the other. I have heard that the externs, using the externs keyword, is being phased out by Apple. I'm not sure if that's true or not, though. I'd have to read more into the documentation. So the singleton option may be the more desired one from going forward. I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or need any further explanation. Thanks.